Next, we're going into our public comment agenda item, and we this past little while we had a lot of people wanting to sign up. Unfortunately, not everybody could get in, so we'll just get started on here. We are trying to limit them to 2 minutes. I think we've got 16 comments here. So we'll start off with Lexi Cunningham, and then Brianna, Hugh, you're on deck.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I hope you can hear me okay. Good, thank you. I'm Lexi Cunningham, Executive Director of the Utah School Superintendents Association, and I am speaking on behalf of the association today. The Utah School Superintendents Association believes in advocating for all children in public education. As educational leaders, we devote ourselves to public education because we believe in the potential of every child. Our schools are open to all, and we welcome the opportunity to serve our students, families, and communities. Education is the great equalizer, and when every child achieves his or her full potential, it benefits our communities, our economy, and our state. We embrace the challenges that are presented to us and celebrate the success of our students and our teachers. As Frederick Douglass once said, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. We have become concerned with the negative rhetoric coming from some Utah State Board of Education members. While we understand that all board members are private citizens and free to speak outside of their official capacity, it is concerning to us when the line between private citizen and board member becomes blurred. When teachers and schools are attacked and data-validated programs supporting all students are labeled as negative, we question what will happen to the productive dialogue and collaborative support that we have always received from the Utah State Board of Education. When we should all be working together to support students, teachers, and schools, it is difficult to do so when we are worried about what district, school, program, or educator will be the next target. If a board member has questions for us, please ask. If you would like to visit our schools, please let us know and we'll arrange a tour. If a constituent comes to you with a question or concern, please tell us and let's work together to address the issue. We want to be your partners in education, but we will also continue to advocate for our students, our teachers, and our schools. If education is a priority, and as Chair Huntsman said, words have power, then the negative behavior and rhetoric must stop coming from certain board members. We know that working together, we can accomplish much for the children of our state, and we want to continue to be your partners in education. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. And then the next is, it looks like a beautiful name, and I'll pronounce it wrong, but I think it's Zeyao or Eyao, Z-E-X-I-A. Oh, so you're on deck. So, Brianna.
Hi, I'm not going to turn on my camera because I'm coming to you from Maui. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. As the mother of 4 biracial children who are currently students at elementary, junior high, and high schools in Alpine School District, and as an educator myself, I wish to express my support for both the updated definition of equity and my support for the equity and inclusion training proposed for educators in Utah. Here in Utah, we live in a culture that is dominated by a specific ideology. It's not a bad ideology, but it definitely caters to a specific kind of student and a specific kind of family. Since moving here 5 years ago, our biracial family has been on the receiving end of experiences that range from ignorant comments to flat out racist actions. When reported to the teachers and administrations, they were at a loss for how to handle the situations. I believe that generally speaking, teachers and administrators care about my children. I've seen them demonstrate it in countless ways, but their failure to show up for my children in those moments of deep hurt tells me that we are not doing enough to address the racial issues in this state. Hearing the accounts of other non-white or multiracial families and their students' treatment at the hands of peers, coaches, and even adults, it is blatantly clear to me that we have a problem here in Utah. Equity is not ensuring equal outcomes for all students, but rather providing better access to all of the resources our school districts have to offer. The goal of education is to provide access to the wealth of knowledge available and explicit instruction on how and where to find that knowledge. As teachers and parents, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, whether it's knowing exactly how to correctly diagnose a child so they get the IEP that will fit their needs, to the non-white, non-binary student who isn't seen or acknowledged. We have a responsibility to learn what we don't know so we can help where we're most needed. One of the criticisms of anti-racism training for educators is the idea of white guilt or white shame. As a white woman who has spent the last 17 plus years studying the topic of racism, inclusion, and how we move forward in my own family and in my own community, I can attest that this is very uncomfortable work. But if we as parents and educators are not willing to sit with our discomfort long enough to understand what is making us uncomfortable and not deflect, how do we expect our children and students to do it? In education, we have a term for that discomfort, the zone of proximal development, as good old Vygotsky calls it. Our job is to guide students from a place where they're unable to do something to a place where they can accomplish something unaided. The space between those two places is where we are at. I just want to voice my support and tell you that I love education and I love the parents in our states. But I just want to voice my favor both of updating the definition of equity and the anti-racism training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is it Zay or Z? I'm hoping you'll correct me on that. You're up next, and then Russell Stevenson, you're on deck. So is it Z or Zay? Will you state your full name for me, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Huntsman. It's spelled Z, well, it's pronounced Siemen Sal. So you were close. Thanks for acknowledging my name. Utah State Board of Education members, thank you for allowing me the opportunities to speak with you today. As I indicated, my name is Siemen Sal. I am a first-generation Asian American and most importantly, the mom of 2 teenage sons. I have dedicated the past 2 decades working together with our communities to build an environment where everyone is welcome and belong, including individuals from immigrant and refugee backgrounds. In the great state of Utah, 8% of the population are foreign-born, 17% of children live in immigrant families. Although I can provide you statistics on the importance of investing in welcoming inclusion and belonging efforts, today I'm going to share with you my personal journey and tell you why this work is important and more relevant it is than it is today. The first lesson my parents taught me as an immigrant in America is to be invisible. Work hard, study hard, don't ever complain or draw attention to yourself. You see, I was trained early on to accept the fact that injustice happened to people like me. I'm supposed to accept the microaggressions, such as when constantly being asked the question, where are you from? Or you should go back home. Or just walk away when someone threatens my husband in a parking lot because they thought that he was from Vietnam. When I became a mom, I tried to do everything I can to minimize my son's differences so they can fit in, including making the conscious decision not to teach them Chinese, which I regret and they also regret. In the past 18 years, I learned that unless our community is willing to embrace and celebrate our differences, we will never feel like we belong. Unless we can call out racism, inequity, and injustice in our communities, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren will never feel like they belong. I take the courage to share my experience and ask you to take the courage to respond. I applaud USBE's resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in Utah schools. We all share the responsibility to respect others' rights, differences, and dignity, and sustain an environment that is conducive to fostering the highest level of learning for all. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Siemen Sal. Next, we'll have Russell Stevenson with Curtis Linton on deck.
Hello, I'm standing outside my office right now, and I would like to express my strong support for the diversity, equity, and inclusion training proposed. Many people talk about Dr. King's views. I have too. I helped to launch a major diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative at Michigan State University. I hold a PhD in African history from that same university, and I am currently certified to teach in the state of Utah. At Michigan State University, I spoke at the Martin Luther King Jr. commemoration about my views of Dr. King's visions. But Dr. King knew that the movement was more than about Dr. King. It was about fixing the problems that everyday Americans face, students of color included. If we fail to teach race in Utah, we fail to teach about Utah. When we tell students not to talk about race, we are instructing them to pretend like their histories do not exist. We are instructing Black students to pretend like their enslaved ancestors did not exist. When we ask students not to talk about race, we are asking Indigenous Americans to pretend like reservations do not exist. If we refuse to talk about race, we should also hang a sign outside every classroom door saying, "Dear Black students, your histories are not welcomed here. Dear Latino students, your histories are not welcomed here. Dear immigrant students, your histories are not welcomed here." Teaching race and diversity explicitly means teaching that all lives matter. Teaching race means caring about all of our students. I urge the board to resist those voices who would have us ignore the lives, histories, and experiences of our students in order to please some constituents. Our students of color should not be left to the whims of a majority. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Curtis Linton with Tony Zhani. You're on deck.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I'm likewise speaking today in support of the USBOE adopting the proposed definition of equity and the training and support for teachers that goes along with it. Over the past 20 years, I've researched the power of educational equity in schools here in Utah and across the US. The definition I've read that is proposed for Utah, it's a great definition. And so I have to ask the question, what is educational equity? Educational equity is a promise and a guarantee that each individual student will receive the support and opportunity each of them uniquely needs to connect with the learning and thrive in their education. An equitable school honors the unique heritage and family identity of every student, however diverse each student might be amongst their peers. I have a personal story around this. I grew up in Sandy, Utah. My teachers, my peers were just like me. I was a white male Mormon student, and that's what most of my teachers, shared that same heritage. I thrived in my education here because my teachers understood me and I understood them. When I went away to graduate school at USC, I had a professor make a rather derogatory remark about my Mormon heritage. And for the first time in my educational experience, I found myself retreating, trying to hide my identity, not trusting my professor, worried about when my heritage might be called out again. That was an inequitable situation because who I was, who my family had taught me, and the identity that we honored was not respected within that learning environment. Well, I find myself today as a white father of 2 Black children who attend schools here in Salt Lake City. My kids have had highly equitable teachers that they've experienced, and they've also been thrust into some very inequitable situations. And so as a white father watching my Black kids grow up in these Utah schools, I've seen firsthand the power of when a school embraces equity, when it respects the identity and makes sure every single student is safe within their learning. So I encourage the Utah State Board to adopt this definition of equity, to really guarantee equity for each and every student. We can honor these unique heritages. We can talk about race and culture and about our differences and respect them within the classroom. When we do that, every student within their unique identity will thrive. Thank you very much for making this effort to guarantee an equitable education for every student.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Tony Zhani and then Casey Hard, you're on deck.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Dr. Cunningham, really appreciated your comments this morning. My name is Tony Zhani. I am a parent of a high school senior in Jordan School District. I'm a literacy specialist and an instructional coach at Rose Park Elementary in Salt Lake City. I'm a national board certified teacher with a master's degree in school leadership and administration. I want to voice my support for the anti-racist and equity recommendations that are on today's agenda. I've reviewed these materials and I believe they are very well crafted. They steer clear of politics and focus on what's best for students and families. Simply put, we should all seek to embrace equity and reject racism. I've been in education for over 20 years. When I first started, I was told to be colorblind. Ignore color, ignore race, treat everyone the same. Inadvertently, the message was everyone should be like me. Here at Rose Park, Most of our students are students of color, and they represent a wonderful variety of cultures. Fortunately for our students, we aren't trying to be colorblind. We are working to reject racism and honor every student's race and culture. Students at Rose Park are more invested in school because the teachers honor the students for exactly who they are. Anti-racist training for educators is good for Utah students and families. When our students feel like their culture is important, like they matter for who they are, then they become more invested in school. Ignoring race and ignoring culture tells our children that very important parts of their lives don't matter. That does not make school joyful, and it does not enhance learning. I teach because I want to provide the best opportunities for every child. I presume that most of you ran for state school board for similar reasons. The equity and anti-racism recommendations that are on today's agenda are well crafted and without political slant. Equity and racism are important for Utah's children, all of Utah's children. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Casey Hard and then Bianca Mittendorf. You're on deck.
Hi, my name's Cassie, and I am a mother of 4 boys, one who's graduated, a senior, and 2 in elementary school in the Jordan School District now. And I'm just here as a parent to say thank you for diving into this and being willing to have these conversations. A couple of years ago, I worked for a minute as an intervener for the School for the Deaf and the Blind at Oak Canyon Junior High in Linden, and there were very few minority students there. I regularly saw one of the only Black boys get blamed for a lot of things. And I think that Utahns are amazing and so loving and so kind and open. And I don't think that they know enough about these things. I just want to say thank you for exploring this. And I agree with the definition of equity that will hopefully be adopted today. My kids will be better if they can sit next to kids who come from a different place, who have access to everything that they need. Now I work in a global position in a new company, and I see the need for our students in Utah to understand other cultures and other backgrounds. And I know that what I experienced when I was at Oak Canyon made me nervous for their future in that way. And so I see a real opportunity here to expand the understanding amongst our students and our population, especially as Utah is changing and growing and our businesses are expanding and bringing in new people. So thank you again. My message is simple, I'm just a mom, but I look forward to Utah being better about these things and learning and growing together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Bianca Mittendorf with Cheryl Perlman on deck.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, Superintendent Dixon and esteemed board members. My name is Bianca Mittendorf, and I'm the Title IX coordinator for Davis School District. I'm also the education chair for the Ogden NAACP, as well as the ethnic minority representative on the Davis Education Association board. And I'm coming before you today to strongly speak in support of the proposed changes involving the anti-bias and equity professional development. And I say that because of looking at where we are right now, this is very much needed. I think we have tried to employ a practice of equality in terms of making sure that students are treated fairly, equally, and that will be enough. But we're rapidly finding out that that is not the case. It is not enough to help our students achieve, especially those students that come from communities that have been historically marginalized. And we have to do more to ensure that those resources, the funding, all of those opportunities are put in the path of students that most need it so they can achieve success, because that's what equity is, giving students or giving everyone what they need. Whenever I think about a comparison between equality and equity, a really good example comes to mind, and it's, imagine if you're in the military and everyone just gets a pair of size 10 boots, right? That's just standard issue. That's what everyone gets. That's equality. And clearly you can see how, while that may work for some people, that can be problematic for others and lead to further issues for wearing shoes that are the wrong size. Equity, on the other hand, means just right from the jump, everyone is going to get exactly what they need. And so I think that in order to continue with the momentum that we have gained, and with everything where we are currently as a country and as a society, and where we've come to a place where we are now having to reckon with some past mistakes and really understand that what we've done before wasn't enough and we can do better. So I think let's continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll have Sherry Lynn Furman, and then Michelle Loveday, you're on deck.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I had some technical difficulties. Thank you. Thank you for taking my comments into consideration today. I'm the parent of 4 children who've either graduated from or are currently enrolled in Weber School District schools in South Ogden. My 3 oldest children are white, and my youngest son is Black, adopted from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In my home, we must face race conversations daily. My son has grappled with losing his birth family, moving to a different country, and assimilating into a new family at a young age. He attends church and school in a predominantly white community, and yet he is proud to be Black and to have dual citizenship in Congo and in the United States. Our family has benefited from valuing our differences and learning about each other's ethnic backgrounds. I'm voicing my concern today about the recent suggestion that colorblindness, an outdated and damaging concept, should be encouraged in our Utah schools. The claim that anti-racism is actually racism endangers children of color. Our family has actually had some good experiences with educators who understand the need to see race in the classroom. One of my son's elementary school teachers asked me for recommendations for literature about the slave trade. A junior high school history teacher expressed sensitivity prior to discussing the transatlantic slave trade and asked for advice. And yet, school is the only place in my son's 16 years where he has been called the N-word. The children who demeaned him in that way aren't colorblind, and they need help understanding the value of people's differences. They need to learn ways to talk about race out loud and not in whispered profanity. School is a place where we learn how to discuss issues like race, not ignore them. Those who write curriculum and those who teach it have an opportunity to positively impact future workplace environments and embrace the societal norms and gifts of a multi-ethnic country. If we pretend that we are all the same, we deny my son's origin story, early childhood experiences, and family history. He can study his ancestors' history in school the way a child with German ancestry studies their ancestors' immigration story to America or World War II. My son ought to feel safe, not awkward, discussing racial issues in class, and so should his classmates and teachers. As has happened in my family, all of our children will benefit from learning about their own and other races by our schools teaching accurate histories, using literature that honestly represents people of color, and spotlighting scientists of all races, etc. I ask the school board to resist the urge to ignore the richness that is all around us and instead promote policies and curriculums that recognize and incorporate the spectrum of skin color. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Michelle Loveday with Karen Burns on deck.
Hi, thank you for having me here to speak today. And I want to thank all of those before me that have spoken so well and had such great statements. I'm a mom of 5 children, 3 adult and 2 school-age children, and I've been an educator for 20 years here in the state of Utah and in North Carolina and Ohio. I'm speaking in support of equity like my colleagues ahead of me before. The smartest people I know are those that never want to stop learning and being willing to work with others. When we work toward understanding what's best for students, we must start with intentional conversations and listening from everyone and hearing multiple perspectives. It's important to not only surround yourself with people who think like you, but go outside of your group. That is when an organization grows, is open to positive change, and creates student impact. As the definition of equity is being evaluated and how we teach it in schools, we need to keep in mind the power and safety of a school, the student, teacher, and parent collaboration. I challenge you to live by your mission statement of the board, and in order to provide equitable conditions for students, teachers must feel safe to address the day-to-day issues students face in the areas of ability, race, gender, and culture. Because we recognize students' agency to learn on their own, they are going to come to school with questions on what they have seen in the news, read in books, or on the internet. What kind of learning environment will we create when we stifle questions from students to their teacher? As a mother, I want my children to have trusted adults besides myself to turn to and bounce ideas off of them. Do we not trust our teachers enough to offer them the opportunity to have authentic conversations that occur in the classroom, knowing that these teachers will always have the respective parents in mind? We must have spaces where we can have realistic, crucial conversations and not shy away from them. That is how we create empathy, humanity, and the ideal portrait of the Utah graduate. We all have the power within us to engage. Personal growth involves questions, and there will be no personal growth if it is snuffed out. As our social studies Utah core standards remind us, the most important goal, a well-lived life, excitement, wonder, inquiry, delight, and puzzlement are central to meaningful learning. Social studies should be fun and intriguing for all students and provide opportunities to make lifelong connections between the past, present, and future. It goes on to say, students who appreciate the sacrifices that have been made in the past and understand the challenges that lie ahead can make better decisions in the present. Equity is not a political topic, and its intentionality should be one of access for students and families. I urge each board member to do what they were elected to do: visit schools, talk with educators, and become informed on all sides of the topic, and not spread misinformation, posting divisive information and harmful opinions that make coming to school harder and not safer for our teachers and students. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Karen Burns, and then Cheryl Kofi is on deck.
Hi, my name is Karen Burns. I am currently teaching a 1st and 2nd grade split at Beehive Elementary in the Granite School District. I'm also a trauma trainer for classrooms for NEA and UEA. And I'm really concerned about some of the things that are happening with the attitudes towards colorblindness on our board. I'm here to speak in favor of equity today. And just like Michelle Loveday just said, we need safer spaces in our classrooms for kids. The American Psychological Association recognizes that micro and macroaggressions that are racially biased are something that can traumatize children and cause PTSD as well. And I also really loved what Cassie said about how we need more information. I feel like in the area of racial bias, we have a lot of schools and a lot of teachers and parents and communities that are unintentionally part of this trauma for our students of color. We are half of the equation of the school to prison pipeline in schools. And each time a student's suspended, we know that it doubles their chances for incarceration in adulthood. In Utah, our Latinx students are 3 times more likely to be suspended for similar issues as white students. Our Black students are 7 times more likely, and our Native American kids are 13 times more likely to be suspended for similar violations as white students. So to me, that shows that we have a lot of work to do in our schools. And part of that starts with training our teachers and training our parents on implicit bias, white fragility, the ways that we can impact students in the classroom negatively. And I also think that we need to examine why we have less kids of color graduating, why we have less kids of color that are being qualified to gifted programs. And I know that research also shows on the positive side that we can really make such safer spaces for kids, and suicidality rates go down when kids are seen in our schools. If we have teachers that are trained in making sure that they are unpacking those implicit biases on top of making schools more inclusive, we could really change Utah. And as I hear parents and educators talking about their experiences with great teachers, we need more of those great teachers that have the knowledge to make their classroom safer spaces. We have tried assimilation, and we've tried stripping students of their identities in the past. We had an Intermountain Indian school in Brigham City, Utah in the beginning of the 1900s, which caused extreme amounts of generational trauma. There were so many issues with race. There was an erasure of students' identities, and nothing positive came out of that experience. I do know again. So please, in consideration, make sure that you are understanding our schools need to be safer, and we need equity and diversity trainings in our schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll have Cheryl Kofi with Max Chang.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Kofi. I teach in the Nebo School District. I've taught for the last 14 years, and I was a paraeducator before that. I just want to speak along the same lines that my colleagues have also. We cannot return to a pretense of colorblindness in public schools. Colorblindness is a form of racism. It's a lie. How can white people claim that race doesn't matter when children and adults of color were literally refused any education at all in the United States, and later a separate and absolutely unequal education? White people claim to have no biases based on race, as those in power continue to scrutinize people of color, their hair, their style of dress, their manner of speaking, for some, their accents, if they just look and act more like us. Oh, but race doesn't matter. We don't even see color. But we do see color. That is not the problem. The problem is that in order to reach our students, to educate them, we must see them. We must celebrate them. Our curriculum must be culturally responsive. Our curriculum must recognize and respect the cultures of all our students. We can't do that in colorblind schools. Our students must all see themselves reflected in our content. The problem is that students of color are not given the same opportunities as their white peers. They are steered to lower achieving academic paths, not recommended for special programs and honors classes. White educators make assumptions about them, assumptions about their abilities, their intelligence, their characteristics, and their intentions. The problem is that students of color are judged more harshly than their white peers. They are punished more severely for the same offenses from preschool on. They are expelled at a greater rate than white students, and they're entered into the criminal justice system through schools more often. It is not that they are committing offenses with more frequency. It is because they are educated in a system that was and is built on Eurocentric perspectives and biases. We owe all of our students a rich education, abundant with opportunity. We need to help all of our students reach their full potential. They need to see themselves reflected in the faces of those in power. We owe it to all students to provide them with an education that celebrates them, celebrates their cultures, their uniqueness. We owe it to all our students to see them, to encourage and support them. A colorblind education robs all our students of the richness of a beautifully diverse world. We owe this to our students. We need to be progressive and not regress. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Matt Chang and Shasta Burton. You're on deck.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman and members of the board. My name is Max Chang, and I am the Vice Chair of the Access Committee. On behalf of our Chair, Faustina Mahone Reynolds, who is recovering from a very serious automobile accident, we would like to personally thank the board for unanimously adopting the resolution denouncing racism and embracing equity in Utah schools this past January. As your appointed advisory committee, Access remains committed to collaboratively work with the board in providing the best possible advice from professionals and leaders in our communities to best ensure the well-being of all Utah students. Last December, I was invited to stand on the Utah Capitol steps as Governor Herbert and community leaders such as Scott Anderson of Scott Zions Bank and Gail Miller of the Utah Jazz announced the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Mrs. Miller recounted an unfortunate altercation between a Utah Jazz fan and Russell Westbrook of the Oklahoma City Thunder. She had publicly expressed at that time her disappointment in the fan's unacceptable behavior, but concluded, "We are not a racist community." And yet, on that chilly December morning, on those Capitol steps, she did something with such incredible grace, humility, and humanity. She apologized for saying that we weren't a racist community. She admitted, "I have since learned that we are, and we need to face it." Face it. Achieving equity for all students is not an easy, but it is an achievable task. By learning our collective history with an open mind and heart, we can better develop empathy, which will help us find a path to equity in 3 simple steps. Identify inequity, eliminate inequity, and then cultivate equity. Gail Miller is right. We can't get to a place of eliminating or cultivating equity if we refuse or are unwilling to face inequity. Acknowledging all those around her, she stated, every gathering that we should have this kind of diversity. We need to be able to include everyone. Her vision is something we all should look forward to facing. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Next, we'll hear from Shasta Burton with Caleb Warren on deck.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to the members of the board and Superintendent Dixon for your time, energy, and efforts to help our students become prepared to succeed and lead by having the knowledge and skills to learn, engage civically, and lead meaningful lives. Your vision for our students. I have rarely experienced racism in Utah. I have, however, experienced quite a lot of sexism. When I share my experiences with my male friends, they're often unbelieving. Their responses usually include things like, "That can't possibly be true. I've never seen that happen before," or "I bet you misinterpreted what he said or did." Now that I pointed it out, some of them they see. Then comes the apology, the believing, and sometimes even a change in their vocabulary or behavior. They may even become an ally and point it out to others, all in attempts to create a world where women feel safer, valued, and respected. Until we see, we don't believe. Why is that? I've struggled through my own emotions when approached about bias and privilege, both terms that carry some heavy baggage and negative connotations. Sometimes those terms are used as an excuse, sometimes as an insult, but mostly, I think these terms were created to ask the community to stop, believe, and generate change. I've been lucky enough to attend trainings provided by my district that were so delicately presented. I never once felt ashamed of my whiteness. I never felt attacked. I did not feel defensive. Instead, I was brought beautifully to a moment of reflection, recognition, and understanding. And as a result, I'm a better teacher. Many of us have not seen or experienced the same prejudice as others. It may be hard to believe, but we can do better. Someone I deeply admire said, "If you don't see my color, you don't see me." Ignoring ethnicity and seeing everyone as the same ignores the diverse, beautiful backgrounds that our students bring to our classrooms. It prevents students from celebrating their own identities. I believe we live in a world where most of us are inherently good. We're not evil, we're not racist or sexist with the intention of hurting, but if we know better, we will do better. As educators, we strive to teach our children critical thinking skills, the skills necessary to accept themselves as beautiful and wanted, the skills to reflect on the feelings of others and change their behavior or throw away the garbage, the confidence to lead a happy and meaningful life. We are not talking about tearing down a group of students or shaming someone for being white. We are talking about seeing and celebrating, building relationships and scaffolds to lead all of our students to the knowledge and skills they need to engage civically and lead meaningful lives. Being colorblind will not rid our community of racism. It will only make us a community that suffers from being colorblind. I strongly encourage you to vote for the new terms of equity, and I really appreciate the time to be able to speak to you today.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Caleb Warren and then Heidi Matthews. You're on deck and you'll be our concluding public comment. Caleb.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Most importantly, we'd like to thank the board and the superintendency. Thank you for listening to our concerns and ideas. Thank you for asking questions and thank you for answering questions. We appreciate all opportunities to work together. In discussion that ensued during the March board meeting, Superintendent Coleman made a number of statements which we applaud. His comments reflect the exact type of relationships we wish to continue to foster among administrators and vision service providers in both LEAs and USDB. These statements have been listed in the following page for you to review. We won't read them here due to time constraints. Today, you will be reviewing projects funded by USDB enrichment monies and donated funds. According to R 277-801-64, USDB shall provide the following services free of charge to every LEA, regardless of size, inclusive and additional related services, enrichment programs and activities. Our questions are today, which funds exactly are set aside to meet this requirement? Which of the activities and programs being presented today are offered to fulfill this requirement? And what strategies are in place to notify and include all qualifying sensory students in Utah? Again, we thank you for engagement and support. Respectfully, Keyleth Warren, TBI from Alpine School District, and Susie Blackham, TBI from Utah School for the Deaf and Blind, and members of the UEA Educators of the Blind Caucus. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi Matthews, you're up.
Thank you. My name's Heidi Matthews. I'm a teacher serving as the president of the Utah Education Association, and the 18,000 educators I represent have many varied beliefs and priorities and share many of the same struggles reflective in our nation. We are, however, united in our mission, and that is that all children are deserving of the opportunity and promise of public education. As the USBE, you are doing the important work in leading our education system, and we urge you to stay the course with hard discussions about the impact of racism in our schools. You know, I've been a teacher for over 30 years, and I can tell you if we don't have the words or vocabulary to discuss concepts or we avoid them, we certainly can't understand or learn together, much less fix the issues that put up barriers or cause harm to any of our students. And so often motions of defensiveness and perceived blame cloud what are really intentionally discriminatory practices that are baked into our system for so long that many of us are just beginning to examine and realize the impact. It's an extraordinarily difficult time to be a teacher, and I have right now, and I have 3 things that I am urging you today. So many more, but just 3 today. So 1, encourage discourse about racism in our schools. How can our students learn to live in our diverse world if they don't have the tools to question, challenge, and discuss? And 2, encourage our educators. They are doing amazing things in difficult times. I should say continue to encourage. When even your own are labeling, targeting, accusing of indoctrination, push back. Hold us accountable, yes, but defend and support us. These attacks do not help, and we are becoming an endangered species. And especially we have an opportunity with the ESSER funds, lots of opportunities from MOST and outdoors and social opportunities that we must capitalize on, but especially in our summer learning, let's do Maslow's before Bloom's. And that includes recognizing the second level of Maslow's, right after physical needs, is safety. And the safety of many of our students is often threatened by racism. So we have different beliefs, but I think we can all agree that our students need us to come together so that to assure that they can all learn and thrive. And thank you for all that you do.
And thank you.
And thank you, Chair Huntsman.
Yeah.
Especially.
Good to see you. This concludes our public comment section of our meeting.